Hello everybody, it's Peter McLaughlin, BlueSky Hypnosis. This is Friday Live at 5, and welcome to you, one and all, whether it's your first time here or your 50th time here. Whether you came this way by finding my content on my YouTube channel, which is BlueSky Hypnosis, or if you came right to these lives. I really appreciate your attending these and especially interacting. So the questions that you pose, and I want to really encourage people, as I do always, to make sure you pose any questions or comments you have in the comment section. It really builds this broadcast, this live into what it is. And for some reason, I am not. Oh crap! I am not seeing the comments bar. It has disappeared for some reason. I don't really know what to do about that one. I can hear the comments coming in, but I can't see them for some reason. If you can just hang with me for a second, I'm so sorry. I just want to see if I can find some way to bring them back in. If not, I'm just gonna proceed, and maybe it'll fix itself. Probably not. Wow. Comments. Yeah, I'm not seeing where this would be. Darn. If you can't already tell, technology is not exactly my thing. Bummer. Gosh, I'm so sorry, guys. Dang. All right, I'm going to just walk into this at least. Maybe if it just turns into a presentation, that'll kind of suck, especially for me because I love the comments. But let me just at least start with that. So today's topic is word magic, and the subheading is: Are you being programmed? Are you being subliminally programmed? And I talked about how there are 5 methods for subliminally programming someone. These are methods that hypnotists are taught. I'm so distracted here. I'm sorry. And I guess what I'll do is I'll just start going through what some of those methods are. The first one, the most common one, and it's used in all of our educational system, and that is the principle of repetition. So if you want to get something into someone's subconscious mind, if you want to turn it into an unconscious competence, then you would just repeat it over and over again. And we all know this because we all went to schools, public schools, private schools, training programs, colleges, universities, and so on. And even with hobbies, when you want to teach yourself something or be taught, it just gets repeated over and over and over and over again. And I brought up this lovely image of a door. And I did this because there are 2 parts of your mind. There's your conscious mind, there's your subconscious mind. And when you become an adult, this doorway will form between the conscious and the subconscious. In order to get something into the subconscious mind, you basically have to open that doorway. That doorway is called the critical factor or the critical faculty. And if you can't open that door, you're not going to be successful in persuading someone, in programming someone, or teaching them something new. And the most common way of opening that door is, frankly, brute force. And it's through repetition that you just keep banging and banging and banging away at the door, and finally the door opens through repetition. As I say, it's kind of the most primitive way of getting something into the subconscious mind, but it is very effective and it definitely works. And that's what all schools, universities, training programs, and so forth will utilize. That's the only one of those principles that is sort of consciously utilized through studying and repetition and so forth. Then you will learn something. So that's one of the 5 methods. Another one of the methods is authority. So if you think of how you respond to, say, one of your peers, one of your friends, versus how you would respond to a police officer or how you would respond to a doctor. So if one of your friends said, you don't look so healthy today, that would have a certain impact on you. However, if a doctor in a white lab coat said that to you, it has a much larger sort of disproportionate impact on how that affects you. The next one would be your emotions. Anytime you're in a heightened emotional state, that door that I'm talking about between your conscious and your subconscious mind sort of flings wide open. And in that space, anything that's produced or introduced, I should say, to you, goes right into the subconscious mind. Now, it doesn't mean that whatever's introduced to you when the door is open is something you're going to immediately act upon or it's immediately going to change you. But it has an outsized influence on you, rather than if it's just hitting you on a sort of conscious, rational, logical level. So one of the things that I thought was so cool about all of these, and I'll go through the other ones too. So the other one is hypnosis. So the act of going into hypnosis opens that doorway. And then the last of the 5 would be the effect of your peer group. So if all of your friends are saying, you know what, I really like this restaurant over here, it's going to have a larger influence on you than if a number of strangers said that to you. If all of your friends are suddenly wearing a certain kind of style or fashion, it's going to have an outsized influence on you as opposed to strangers doing that. Now, strangers will have an influence on you, especially if you identify with them. So if they fit into your socioeconomic group, or other types of identities you may have. If you're a student and you see a bunch of other students doing something, if you're in the military and you see a bunch of other soldiers doing something, it will have that larger effect on you. And these things are all hardwired in our brains. One of the things that I've thought about a lot is that when we were cavemen and cavewomen, if you were wanting to know if a creek or a stream running through the forest was safe to drink from, one of the strategies would be to just sit back for a few hours and watch other people, your peer group, go down to the stream and drink from it. If they drank from that stream and they didn't keel over in the next hour or two, you would know that it was safe to drink from that water as well. So all of these things are kind of hardwired into us. They represent, in many cases, shortcuts. Because the brain is wanting to be very efficient. There's a lot of processing it has to do. And over the course of thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of years, it has learned how to become more and more efficient by creating these shortcuts. So if my peer group is all doing something, it's probably something that's safe for me to do. Plus, as I've said on other broadcasts, we have a hardwired need to fit in with the crowd. And this is because of safety. So, just like any other herd animal, there is greater safety in the herd, being inside the herd, than being off on your own. So conforming with the group, conforming with the herd, is a hardwired mechanism that we have in order to fit in. Plus, we have this aspect of trusting the group. Now, these 5 methods that I mentioned, so we have repetition, and that's what all formal education is based upon. We have authority. We have the effect of your peer group. We have emotion. When you're in a heightened emotional state, that doorway pops open. And we also have being in the state of hypnosis. Being in this state of hypnosis opens that doorway, which, by the way, for those people who are taking notes at home and you're interested in what that's called, is called the critical factor or the critical faculty. That's the doorway between the conscious and the subconscious mind. Now, when I learned these 5 methods, when I was going through my hypnotherapy training 15 years ago, I was immediately kind of stunned when I realized that all 5 of these methods are methods that are employed by television, particularly television advertising, or anything else that television seeks to sell you, if you will, right? So television can sell you products and services that are commercials, but then there are also other ideas that can be sold in other formats on television. Okay, so going through that, if you think about advertising, advertisers don't put a commercial on once and then never run it again. If they really want to sell that product or service, they repeat it over and over and over and over and over again. You know, when I watch a football game on Sunday, there are pharmaceutical ads, and they just keep getting repeated over and over again. There are car ads, repeated. There are ads for insurance, repeated. So the repetition part is clearly a function of television. The other one is authority. So on television, you'll see politicians, authority figures. You'll see doctors, authority figures. You'll see actors dressed up as authority figures like doctors in commercials that are selling something, because that's another feature. That's a second of these 5 functions of influencing the subconscious mind and programming people to take an action. In the case of selling you something, it's programming you to buy something. That could be a product or a service, or it could be buying an idea. The next one is a peer group. So if they know that the people watching football games are largely, I'm saying, not all, but largely men in a certain age range, then the commercials may reflect that. It may reflect their peer group. If on another kind of TV show, like The Bachelor, they may say, oh, the audience is totally different for that one. The audience is primarily, not all, but primarily female. And they're primarily in these age groups. And these are the things that they're interested in. So we know that we want to put these kinds of people and appeal to these kinds of needs within the commercials that we run. The next one would be emotion. And so with television, obviously they're advertising before, during, and after programming. And I think that word I just can't get away from that word when it comes to television, because we're talking about sort of programming the mind. And television, they even call it television programming. Television programming is designed in many respects to create and place you in different kinds of heightened states of emotion. Now, it could go back to the football game where you're cheering on your team and your team, is starting to go ahead, and then they start losing, and then they win in the end, and you're in this, intense emotion. It's the same with fictional programming, whether it's, something that's a horror movie, or it's programming around suspense or action and excitement, or romance, or whatever it is. It's going to invoke emotions. That's the 4th thing of the 5 that I've just outlined here. And there are more, trust me. These are just the 5 that I was going to go over today. And then the 5th one, hypnosis. Many people don't realize this, but just the act of watching television puts you into a hypnotic trance. Just the act of watching television will place you in a hypnotic trance. And the reason for this is that you're looking at a flickering image, the television screen. And to your conscious mind, it doesn't look like it's flickering, but it is. And your subconscious mind picks up that frequency of that flickering. You're looking at that fixed image, almost like you're driving at night and you're just looking at the white lines of the road that are going by over and over again. And it lulls you or draws you into this hypnotic trance where, again, that doorway opens. Plus, the programming itself is causing you, in many cases, to kind of lose yourself into the world of the story that's being presented. Whether it's a fictional story, like a serial story of some kind, or it's a news story. And let's face it, even the news on television calls the segments that they produce within the half an hour or hour, they call them stories, news stories. And you can lose yourself into this hypnotic state. So television is actually producing all 5 of these elements that are required, that are taught to hypnotists as to how to open that door, the critical faculty between the conscious and the subconscious mind, in order to embed ideas, messages, and concepts in the subconscious mind and begin to influence a person's behavior. Now, you might say, well, that's kind of creepy. And it can be, because we're talking about mind tools or tools of the mind. And like any tool, the meaning of the tool is the person who's wielding the tool. You could say a shovel is a deadly weapon. And it could be. You could use a shovel as a deadly weapon. You could use it to dig holes in trenches for building projects and so forth, or for cleaning up a mess. The tool itself is agnostic. It really has more to do with who is in control of that tool and what is their motivation, what are their purposes behind using that tool. All right, I'm going to take just a real short break here. I hope you'll bear with me because I want to see if this is driving me nuts. I want to see if I can figure out how to get this. I got it. Oh, awesome. And there are definitely comments here, so I'm gonna jump into the comments right away and see if there are people I can engage with. So cool. Gertrude Hill, hello to you. Jill Turner, English Rose, good to see you here. Marie Hogan, awesome. Maricela, good to see you, Maricela. Here's Sarah W., Leah Wiggins. And then Annie is saying, will there be a chance to watch this back? Yes. So all of the lives that I broadcast on Friday 5 Eastern US, after the live is over, it automatically reverts to static or permanent content on my YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is called BlueSky Hypnosis. Try to keep everything simple. So yes, you can watch it later, as well as all the other ones. They're all still up there. Let's see, here's Leah Wiggins. Leah says, I agree to a degree. However, as we mature, we do realize that a seller will stretch the truth and outright lie. 1950s cigarette commercials with a doctor smoking and telling us how good they were. Absolutely. I want to give you a round of applause for that. And I'll come back to it later in the broadcast today, but I want to sort of jump ahead to how to protect yourself from the conscious manipulation of your mind, from the conscious programming of your mind. And your point is really well taken, that in the 1950s, they would put doctors into print ads and even onto television ads promoting cigarettes and saying, well, this is the one I smoke. And of all the cigarettes, this one is really the healthiest one, or it's healthy for you. And we can tell now, with the benefit of hindsight, that at best, this was absolute ignorance. And at worst, it was just straight up lying to sell more cigarettes. So when I was thinking about how to protect oneself from mind control, if you will, and from this mind programming, the first thing that came into my mind was the thing that most people will talk about when you want to answer that question, and that is awareness. So if you're aware of the techniques that are being used, when they're being used and employed, it is a very powerful defense against exactly what's happening. But then the other thing that came to me was the Latin phrase cui bono, C-U-I-B-O-N-O. And what cui bono means is who benefits. So if you, Mr. Cigarette Company in the 1950s, with a doctor, smoking a cigarette on TV, you're asking me essentially to smoke your brand of cigarettes. And then the cui bono is the question that police detectives ask when there's a crime. Who benefits by this crime? Because that leads you to the most likely suspects of who would have perpetrated the crime. So if you are asking me, Mr. Cigarette Company, to smoke cigarettes, particularly your cigarettes, who benefits? Well, clearly you benefit. That's why you're spending all of this money to put the commercial on in the first place. And another way, so ask yourself that question. Whenever you feel like there is an individual or an entity, an organization of some kind that is promulgating some kind of message to you for you to do something, ask the question, who benefits by me taking this action? And would the person who's asking me to do this have a conflict of interest? Well, in the case of the 1950s cigarette ads, absolutely. You know, if you smoke cigarettes, they're going to benefit because they're going to earn more money. So the simplest thing I say is cui bono, who benefits? The next thing I would say in terms of protection, and this is what we did in our family, is when our first child was born, we took the television and out it went. It left our home. And we had lots of people saying, that's crazy, that's never gonna work, your kids are gonna, you're denying them, you know, you're denying them reality, you're preventing them from exploring the world. They're gonna seem like weirdos with their friends. None of that happened. Going outside and playing, in our opinion, was more like exploring reality. And when our kids would ask us, because they would ask us from time to time, hey, you know, how come we don't have a TV? We would explain to them. We would say, look, the TV basically exists to sell you stuff. That's their business model. Their business model is to make money on advertising. And each advertiser has a vested interest in selling you something, many times selling you something you don't actually need. And we don't want to have that in our house. And they were like, okay, no big deal. They became, you know, they've started reading more and whatnot. So, you know, protect yourself is learn about these techniques so you know what's happening. Number two, cui bono, who benefits? And then number three is consider taking the television out of the house. You know, we have one. You know, honestly, we end up watching it like a couple times a month, maybe, football games. And our daughter plays sports, so we get to watch her on TV every so often. But we haven't really missed it. And I think that it is almost like this portal into your house that is bringing with it all of these conflicted interests, conflict of interests, trying, in the words of what I said to my kids, trying to sell us stuff. Many times, things that we don't actually need. All right, let's see what else we have here. Cool, Marie Hogan is, she is just outlining things, which is really cool. Repetition, authority, emotions, peer group, hypnosis. These are the 5 methods that hypnotists are taught about how to bypass that doorway and get into the subconscious mind. All right. Just scrolling down here. Here is Carmen Fringer. Hello, Carmen. And here is Valerie Nelson. Valerie, Peter, I finally got my pendulum, but was having trouble finding your video on it. Are we counting on our spirit guides for answers? Not necessarily. And it depends. You could specifically say, you know, I want my spirit guide to control this pendulum for the next 10 minutes for my highest and greatest good. But in general, the way I conceive of this is that it's your higher self that is sort of tapping into these answers, which if you want to go even deeper into this, I think are coming sort of from the quantum field. And it's bypassing your conscious mind, and it's going directly into the part of you that you might refer to as your gut feeling, as your intuition, and so on. If you just go onto my channel, BlueSky Hypnosis, and you type in the word pendulum, it should come right up. If you have any further problems with that, you can send me an email and I'll send you a link to it. It's peter@blueskyhypnosis.com. Alrighty. let's see, here's Leah Wiggins, and Leah is saying, when watching anything, it is beneficial to ask oneself, what is this commercial newscast trying to tell us? I very seldom watch any television. I do have a DVD player and watch DVD. No news. Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea, Leah. And I think the best way, and I've said this on this channel before, the best way to take in news is to take it in through the written form, because most human communication is nonverbal. It's what the body is doing, and it's what the voice is doing. This is the art of the actor. So an actor can say any phrase in the world, have a good day, have a nice day, and make it sound like it's sincere and earnest, or make it sound like it's sarcastic, make it sound like they're confused, or a whole plethora of shading of meaning by saying the same phrase. And the television news can put images in front of you. They can put sounds in front of you. They can put music. They can even, and I'm not saying they do it, but they could use subliminal messaging through this extremely powerful medium of the moving image, of a broadcasted image. Or you could acquire the same information in the written form. I'm not saying that the written form, you can't be programmed through a written form. You can. It's just, it's not as powerful. It doesn't have all of those other elements that are working, in concert with trying to create an impression. So recently I watched this Tom Hanks movie called Greyhound. It was based on a book that I loved by C.S. Forester. I read it years and years and years ago, and they made a movie about it called Greyhound, about the Battle of the North Atlantic between the German U-boat submarines and the Allied destroyers and corvettes and freighters that were trying to bring goods and material and men over to Britain from the United States. And in the movie, the filmmakers are using, as they do, all of the elements to their advantage, because they're trying to tell a story, and they're trying to manipulate the viewer into a certain point of view. And one of the techniques that I noticed was every time you see an image of the U-boat, and the U-boat would be underwater or maybe cruising along the surface, it always is accompanied in the film by this very sinister kind of music that you might hear in a horror film. So without having to be told anything, you might not even speak English. But if you heard that music, and you're already drawn into this story, you're already in a hypnotic state, it's telling you over and over again there's something evil and sinister about these hulking shapes. And sure, to the Allies, they were the enemy. But if you were to shift the role around and you were, you had a loved one, you lived in Germany and had a loved one serving on a U-boat, they would have been the heroes and the Allies would have been the enemy. So moving away from the news on television and on the radio, I think is a really wise idea. Not the least of which is, I pulled this up before we started today. Let me just get this one down. And where are we? Conscious. Well, I'm having a good one today. I will just tell you what the statistics are because I can't see where I saved it. I looked up media consolidation. And what I found was in 1983, there were 50, that's 50 major media companies in the United States, promulgating, broadcasting, distributing information through radio, television, and magazines and newspapers. And in 2020 or 2021, that had gone down from 50 major media companies to five. So we don't have, by orders of magnitude, anywhere near the multiplicity of of diverse opinion that we would have had in 1983. That's another thing to keep in mind. And that if you, now with the internet, if you hunt around, you can find alternative, so-called alternative or independent sources of information, and then decide for yourself how that fits in with your view of the world. Or compare one of the behemoth, mainstream, one of the 5 conglomerate opinions about things with what are the smaller guys and women, what are they saying about the same issue? So yeah, I think that's you can tell, that's an important, I think that's a really important point in terms of stepping back a little bit from this cacophony of data and information, and most importantly, how the information is arranged and then presented. Cool. Leah's saying the same thing. We can draw our own conclusions when we read the news, especially if you read the news from multiple sources. Yep, absolutely. Here is Carmen Fringer, and Carmen is saying, I missed television news that showed you the good side of the world before the horror of things. Now it's manipulative fear-mongering and pushing agenda instead of investigative, fact-driven honesty. I think a lot of people would agree with you. And it's probably hard to just say blanket statements, 100% of the time this or 100% of the time that, or things were 100% better, 50 years ago. I know they weren't, but definitely there are gradations. One of the things that I talked about in the promo was your emotional state controls your actions. And in particular, fear. So fear and greed. These are the 2 sort of primal emotions that govern the animal part of us as human beings. And if you can move somebody into a state of fear, one of the first things that they're going to do is that their thinking, the way your brain functions, is that your thinking is going to move from your prefrontal cortex, the executive functions of your brain, and it's going to move back to the lizard or primitive part of your brain that's only concerned with survival. So your thinking is impaired when you're in a state of fear. And as I mentioned before, you have a hardwired proclivity to seek the comfort, if you will, of the herd, of being with the vast majority of people because it feels safer there. So one of the techniques of an organization or a person that wants to have you believe something is to position themselves as representing or as being the majority. So one of the famous examples of this was in Russia during the Russian Revolution. The opponents to the Tsarist regime called themselves the Bolsheviks. Now, I don't speak Russian, but my understanding, at least if what I've read is true, is that Bolshevik means majority. And that when they took on the moniker Bolshevik, they were not the majority, but they wanted to present the illusion to the people that they were the majority, because when you have conflict like that, that was, revolution and civil war, people are going to be frightened and scared. And that hardwired proclivity is to move toward the herd, to move toward what's perceived as the majority. This works even with ideas and beliefs. If you can promulgate a belief or an idea and convince people that this is what the vast majority of people already believe, or they currently believe it, or that's the direction they're going in, it's more likely that that will be attractive to you based on you as a human, your hardwiring. And this is certainly something that's used in television advertising all the time. They'll say, 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this product. 7 out of 10 Americans choose this product over all the other ones. They're really wanting to harness that power of the peer group and the perception of being a majority, because they know from all of the psychological research that's been done that has a massive outsized influence on people's behavior. All right. I wanted to pop up this image here. This is a book called Propaganda, and the man who wrote it was Sigmund Freud's nephew. His name was Edward Bernays. And he wrote this book, I want to say in the 1930s. And this book is one of the most powerful and seminal works on how to shift the mind of masses of people. In fact, it was considered to be so powerful by Reich Minister Joseph Goebbels. I think his title was Reich Minister. He was in charge of propaganda in Nazi Germany, that he reportedly carried this book around him all through World War II and utilized the principles that were laid out in this book for disseminating propaganda throughout the German Reich. And one of the statements that Bernays made had to do with he called it the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the masses constitutes an invisible government. He said the real power are the people who are behind the scenes, who control the attitudes and the preferences and the thoughts and hence the behaviors of the masses of people. And sort of perversely, he said that this was essential for a democracy, which to me is kind of a contradiction in terms. I would tend to think that you'd want free-thinking people that are presented with information as free of bias as possible, or at least from multiple sources. So they're getting it from all different kinds of sources, and then they're making up their own minds as to what it all means, and then they're voting and blah, 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 blah. So this is what Edward Bernays talked about, and he was enormously influential. His main area was, he's considered to be the father of public relations. So when a politician gets in trouble, when a politician wants to sell an idea, they generally go to a high-powered public relations agency, and the public relations agency takes over from there. They take over the messaging, and they use the techniques that Bernays first sort of codified and then began to use in the field of public relations, which he is, reputed with having started. And he drew a lot of his understanding and insight from his uncle, who was Sigmund Freud, which is kind of incredible. And the book is an interesting read. And you can even see videos of Edward Bernays on YouTube if you want to hear what he has to say. I mean, I think he was kind of an evil genius, honestly. One of his tenets was, and this is still being used today, is you find out what people want. You find out what they really want, not what they say they want, but what their emotions are, because we're emotional creatures and we make decisions based upon emotion. And then we give it the conscious reason why we made this emotional choice. It's just how we work. And so he wanted to get into the minds of his target audience and find out what they already believe and what they already really want, and then twist it to his own ends. So one of the most interesting examples of this was in the 1920s, women still did not have the right to vote. And there was this whole movement, the women's suffrage movements. They called them suffragettes. And they were advocating for the vote. They were advocating for equality with men. Bernays, one of his clients we're back to cigarettes now, Leah. It was a cigarette company. Excuse me. And he wanted to sell more cigarettes. And he realized, hey, wait a minute. In the 1920s, it wasn't cool for women to be smoking cigarettes. So he basically his cigarette company only had 50% of the market, 50% of the available market of the smokers who were men. What if we could get the same percentage of women to smoke? Oh my God, we could double our revenues. Okay, well, what do women want? They want equality. They want to be like men. So let's call these cigarettes freedom torches. Freedom torches, because women want to be free to vote, free to, participate in society with all the rights and privileges that men do. And so he organized marches of women, you got the suffragette movement, and there are pictures of all these women walking down the street smoking cigarettes, showing the world how they're equal to men. This guy was an evil genius. And those kind of examples just go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And he used all of the techniques that he wrote about in the book Propaganda, many of which I'm going over today, about how to get inside the mind of his target audience to get them to do what he wanted them to do and have them feel like they're just they're exerting their own free will. They're engaging with the world in this really powerful, wonderful way. All right. Let's see, this is Neanderthal. I love your handle name. I recently saw a commercial for a chip company where they never said or displayed the name of the product. What are your thoughts on creating negative space in hypnosis that sort of pulls us in? And Neanderthal is saying it was very effective, and then says, I would have tuned it out otherwise, and it would have been effective on mute. All right, so go back to this. What are your, where they never said or displayed the name of the product? What are your thoughts on creating negative space in hypnosis that sort of pulls us in? So this is going to be a tough one for me to answer. I'd love to see, if you could send me the link to that or post it here. My email address is peter@blueskyhypnosis.com, or if you could post, I don't know if you were able to do that, post a link or where we could find that commercial. I'd love to see it. What I can say about commercials is that it used to be, in the pre-sophisticated days, it used to be that commercials basically just described what the product was. Right? They just thought, oh, if it has higher quality materials and it's a lower price and it does all these things, then people would want to buy it. And what they realized, especially starting in the 1950s, with a group of men called the depth, D-E-P-T-H, depth psychologists, they wanted to go deeper into the psyche and really understand what motivated people. That's where they started coming up with appeals to other things, right? To the primal aspects of being a human. I mean, I've always thought about Nike that doesn't say anything about sneakers or their apparel. They just have the swoosh, and then they have a phrase and says, just do it, right? That they're spending millions or hundreds of millions of dollars on that, and they're not telling you anything about the sneakers. So they're obviously appealing to another part of you. So, and I'm not sure if this answers your question, but I do think that even with hypnosis, when I'm working one-on-one with someone, and let's say they want to stop smoking, I want to know what it is that smoking does for them, and then I want to find out why they want to stop smoking, and then find the emotional reason why they want to stop smoking, and then link that back to the motivation for letting go of this other thing. In other words, make that emotion more powerful than whatever it is that the smoking is currently doing for them. So, I was taught, and I know advertisers work the same way, is to always go for the emotion. But again, with that specific instance, I'd love to see the link if you feel like posting it or sending it to me or whatever. I'd definitely take a look at it. Thanks for raising that. Yeah, Leah, I was thinking the same thing. In the 1970s, Virginia Slims was a brand of cigarettes. And they always had a beautiful, sophisticated, well-dressed woman holding on to the cigarette, to the Virginia Slims. And the tagline was, "You've come a long way, baby." And they were definitely playing on Edward Bernays and the Freedom Torches. It used to be where you couldn't vote, and a man kind of controlled your life, and you went from your father to your husband, and you couldn't have the same kind of job as a man and everything else. And now look where you are. And they link it to the cigarette, which is another, I didn't know if I was going to get to this today or not, but thanks to Leah, I am. Linking is another aspect of subconsciously programming you of influencing your relationship to a product, a service, or a person, or an organization. So the common way is to take a celebrity and have the celebrity, say, these are the greatest glasses I've ever worn. Or you have a football team, and the whole football team has the Nike swoosh on them somewhere. What the company is doing there is that they're linking your emotional feelings to your team and your heroes that play on that team, and all the great feelings that you've had watching them in person on television and whatnot, being with your friends. They're linking all that emotion as that you've invested into the team with the swoosh that they've put on their uniforms, and they pay handsomely to do that. That's called linking. So in that Virginia Slims ad that Leah is referring to, there's a linkage between this beautiful, sophisticated, she looks like she has everything, linking their product to the woman and to women's rights. They were still using that same tactic to sell cigarettes, which we know makes people sick, right? And kills them in some cases. They were still linking this together to get at that deeper emotion of women wanting to be free, women wanting to feel equal. So yeah, thanks, Leah. We're on the same brainwave here. It's pretty cool. Marie Hogan says, propaganda is a huge topic in the psychology of marketing classes that my son-in-law teaches. Cool. Yeah, I'd love to know if your son-in-law has any videos on YouTube on that topic. People here might like to watch them too if he has some of that. That's a fascinating subject for sure. Neanderthal is saying, I was a bit off topic. This is the almost anti-magic word. Okay, all right. The reason I put word magic into the title of today is because words are magic. I don't think it's a mistake or a coincidence that when we all went to school when we were children, we were taught how to spell, S-P-E-L-L. We were taught and we learned about spelling, S-P-E-L-L-I-N-G. Those words are words that are used in magic. If you think about it, words create. So words create a marriage. Words end a marriage. Words create a war. Words end a war. Words create a nation. Our country was created by the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. That's what created our country. And when you think about what our country is, it's not our flag. It's not our government buildings. It's not who our country is. Our country really is those documents and their laws, and they're made up of a bunch of words. One of the things that I say to people all the time is that in order to make sense of the words that I'm speaking right now, giraffe, you have to create an image in your mind, however brief, of the word in order to make sense of it. And therefore, when I'm communicating with you, or you're communicating with other people, or you're being communicated to by mass media, images through the medium of words are being painted in the canvas of your mind. And those images create, in some cases, emotions inside of you, especially when they're strung together, especially when you're shown them. And the reason why this gets back to why the moving image is so much more powerful than just the spoken word, or even less the written word. It's because the image is closer to the emotion than the word. There's less translation that has to occur. You can get right to what you want. When I create a movie and I put that sinister music underneath the soundtrack, every time I show you the Germans, I'm beginning to influence you because I've gotten closer to your emotions. You know, these emotions are, I think, the key, that it's the emotional manipulation through all of these other techniques that causes the programming. All right. And I think the propaganda, yeah, we had that. Conscious, yes. Oh, this is a slide that I had long ago, but I thought I'd bring it up again. I'm just going to make it real big for a second. Confucius said, "Signs and symbols rule the world, not words nor laws." And I just put a bunch of symbols on there because the symbol is closer to the emotion. And some of these symbols that are on there, I didn't put a swastika on there, but some of the symbols that are on there invoke immediately emotion within us. And I put, even on our $1 bill, we have some very strange symbology on the $1 bill, which is interesting to contemplate. All right. Here is Teresa. Teresa saying, "I had my first Akashic record visit myself via your beginner instruction here. The sensations and the energy seem permanent. How to handle the joy, elation, and love I feel?" Well, that sounds pretty good. It's almost like if you said, "Hey, I just won the lottery and I got a check for $3 million. How am I going to handle all this money?" I guess you'll feel your way into it, right? I mean, those are such wonderful emotions. I think it's probably something really good to meditate on. Sit with those emotions, the ones that we call really good and the ones we call bad. Sit with them, go deeper into them, and see where it leads you. That would be my advice. And let us know what happens. And good for you. Way to go. Thanks for commenting. Here's MH. MH says, "I think, Peter, there is just so much information that we get bombarded with on a daily basis. TV is a huge part of it. It feels overwhelming for me anyway." Yep, absolutely. And the other thing I would like to point out, based upon your language, is one of the techniques for inducing somebody in hypnosis is to overwhelm them. Is to give their conscious mind so many things to do in such a short period of time that the conscious mind becomes overwhelmed. And when that happens, it's looking for a way out. So the way this unfolds in, say, a stage hypnosis show is that the hypnotist could say, "I want you to, tap your nose, hop on your left foot, count backwards from 100, and then sleep." It's so hard to do all of those other things, and the conscious mind starts feeling uncomfortable and overwhelmed. When the hypnotist says sleep and maybe pushes down on their shoulder or just taps them on the back of the head, the subconscious or the conscious mind can say, "I'm out of here. I'm checking out." And the person goes into a hypnotic trance very fast. So it's actually a technique of hypnosis to produce overwhelm and then offer a quick, simple solution, which often the mind will take because it's a relief from all of this other stuff. So I think, another aspect of how do we protect ourselves from all of this stuff is limiting that information, especially the source that it comes from. That television is like a circus in front of us, right? Whereas reading something is much more controlled. Even that can become overwhelming. But again, my advice would be limit the television. Maybe limit the times of day where you're taking in the news, because there's so much going on and there's so much stuff that's happening that can be construed as being distressing. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that, MH. Okay. Yeah, Leah is saying the visualization is more direct. Yeah, it is. And the thing to remember is that there's also the auditory part. There's also the kinesthetic part. So as humans, we have these different representational systems. And some people tend to focus, and I think I said this last week, more on one than the other. That's their lead representational system. So I keep using, probably because I think my lead representational system is auditory, I keep using that sinister music playing underneath the soundtrack every time the German U-boat was pictured in the movie Greyhound, because that communicated vast amounts of information and meaning emotionally every time that occurred. It wasn't, I mean, there was a visual aspect to it as well, but it was the auditory part that really sank into me. Sank. And other people, it might have been the visual one at that point. So it depends on who the person is and what the circumstances are. But yeah, visualization, auditory stuff, and maybe even kinesthetic stuff. So, theaters experimented for a while with surround sound and with, the chair would start shaking because they're starting to affect your kinesthetic senses. Here's Carol Jones. Why do I see the one-eyed eye of Horus relentlessly in the media? Okay, so that is, where was the symbols? That was here. So the one-eyed is right here on the dollar bill, the top of the pyramid, the top of the unfinished pyramid. There are lots of theories about that. That's something that and I want to make sure that I don't stray into super controversial territory. But there are a lot of theories about that, about the symbology of the Eye of Horus, the all-seeing Eye of Horus, and what that represents. And I guess what I'd recommend is just go on the internet and start reading about it, read a variety of different sources, and see what you come up with. I don't think anybody could give you a definitive answer of what that means. I mean, people will definitely tell you, oh, it means this. But I don't know that there's proof that it means this specifically, but there are certainly lots of fascinating theories around that. And it's clear that a number of large corporations either use or have used that idea of the all-seeing eye in their logo. So was it CBS, the television network CBS used the eye. But it's a great question, and it's fascinating to start going down that rabbit hole if you have the time and the temperament to follow these breadcrumbs where they lead you. Oh, here's Carmen Fringer saying, I don't believe much in words anymore. Actions in proper context mean more. That's a sad thing that I almost automatically question how real someone's words are. I think like anything in life, it's a question of extremity. Like, are you walking around in a state of pessimism and doubting where you don't believe anything? Are you walking around in a state of credulity where you believe everything that comes to you? Are you only believing from certain sources, but you're not believing from other sources? I think there's a healthy balance somewhere in there. And I think if there's someone in your life whom you trust, then it's healthy to trust them. And maybe they've been misled or something like that, but I don't think we can really exist as humans if we walk around in this state of cynicism where we believe nothing from anyone all the time. I also don't think that we'd be very successful, and our ancestors wouldn't have gotten us to this point if they believed everything that they were told all the time. It's certainly true that we're bombarded with more information by orders of magnitude compared to any other generation before us, and that presents unique challenges. And so, yes, being able to get to a place where you can trust someone, and then once you can trust them, to be maybe less vigilant, a little bit less vigilant than you would have been in the past, the way you would be with a complete stranger. That those are probably reasonable things. And the other thing that came to me today too is the old saying that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. So when any individual or organization or group or politician makes extraordinary claims, it seems to me that they should have to supply extraordinary proof if they want us to believe that. And that proof should be something that is verifiable by people, right? Not asking you to believe things that you can't verify, and to just go on faith and faith alone. That would seem to be too far in the direction of over credulity. I wanted to talk a little bit about, too, I didn't want to miss a couple of these things that I promised that I was going to talk about. One is framing. So framing is a concept that comes from neuro-linguistic programming. It also could be construed as falling into something that's called sort of like we called it hypnologic, like hypnotism logic, hypnologic. It doesn't necessarily make sense, but in the right context, it can make perfect sense. So one example of framing might be limiting the options. So in hypnosis, they would call this, say, a double bind. And a double bind could be something like this, which is, I don't know how fast you're going to go into hypnosis in the next 10 minutes. Maybe you'll go into hypnosis really fast and you'll go really deep, or maybe you'll go much, 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 much more slowly in the next 10 minutes. What I'm doing is I'm setting up a frame whereby the only two options, double bind, is you go into hypnosis fast or you go into hypnosis slow. But in both cases, you're doing what I want you to do, which is to go into hypnosis. When I remember my uncle worked at Sears way back in the day, and he used to joke around, by saying, "Will that be cash, check, or credit card?" And that's a bind as well, and that's a frame. It's the option of not buying something is outside of that frame. The only real options or questions is, how are you going to pay for it? And I've seen on the news this sort of thing being conducted, where they have a group of experts sitting around and they're talking about really weighty things, like huge policies, or they're talking about whether, about war, for example. And they'll purposely leave off one of the options. Like one of the options, do we go to war? Do we just put sanctions on them? Well, the third option might be, we don't do anything. We just leave them alone. And I'm not saying, that one of those is correct. I'm just saying that by leaving off an important option, you're creating a frame where you're discarding that one, so that everyone's attention is now inside the frame you want it in, and you're more likely to get the outcome you want, and in this way you're starting to program. You're leaving things off the debate table you don't want to talk about. It's as if it doesn't exist. And I was talking to my wife recently about this concept of computer programming and bugs. And I read about how a bug or a glitch in a computer program is something from the natural world, basically, that comes into an artificial environment that's been constructed by the programmers. And there's this weird thing that comes in from the outside world, and it messes up the program. So you could say that if you constructed a frame and you had your options in the frame, and then somebody else somehow got inside that frame and introduced another option you didn't want in there, you could view it almost like a bug, like this nasty thing from the outside world just came in here. But framing is a really important technique. And I would go back to that example of the movie Greyhound, where that music is playing every time the German submarine is shown. That's a form of framing, right? So the frame you put around a picture, if it's, I think of the Mona Lisa, and if the Mona Lisa has, right now it's got gold gilt frame around it. Well, what if you replace just the frame, same picture? You replace the frame with a pink frame, and it had bunny rabbits on it, little hopping bunny rabbits. Or what if you replaced the frame and it was black and it had swastikas all around it? a person's opinion and attitude and emotional feelings about the same painting would change dramatically if all you did was change the frame around it. And that's where that word comes from. And this is used all the time in order to change how we feel about products, services, people, policies, etc., ideas, etc., etc. The other one that I wanted to get to was subliminal messaging. I mentioned that a few times today, but I just want to talk about that briefly. It's something that I use on my channel, BlueSky Hypnosis. Subscribe if you haven't on YouTube. And it's a way of delivering a message that bypasses the conscious mind. So remember that whole thing about the door? I talked about how there's the conscious mind, there's the subconscious mind, there's a doorway between the two called the critical factor or critical faculty, and that in order to influence or program the subconscious mind, you want to open that door and communicate now with the subconscious mind. So subliminal messages, which means beneath your conscious level of awareness or ability to perceive them, are introduced to you. That automatically bypasses the critical factor. It opens the doorway and gets things directly into your subconscious mind. So for those of you who don't know, on my channel, when I create a subliminal audio, it's really subaudible. Subaudible messages are introduced into your subconscious mind. Those messages, are masked by music or by the sounds of the ocean or by the sounds of rain. But the subconscious mind draws in these messages, influences the subconscious mind for things like, the big one on the channel is weight loss, or learning how to love yourself, or learning how to forgive yourself. And I have audible versions of these things and subliminal versions of these things. Now, if I, this one hypnotist with very limited technological know-how and actual technology, can create these things that can be powerful and beneficial for people, then surely large institutions also have access to this technology and could potentially be using them. Every so often something will pop up, some person will say, oh, here's where Disney might have used a subliminal message, or here's where a news program used a subliminal message, or here's where a political campaign, used a subliminal message, either a subvisual or a subaudible message. And it's always denied, or they blame it on an intern or something like that. But the power, whether it's being used or not, actually exists. So I just wanted to mention that. All right, let's see what else we have here. And actually going to take a couple more questions. And before we do that, I just want to talk briefly about next week. We're going to be doing another spiritual film analysis. I thought we would handle The Matrix, which I think is kind of the mother lode, if you will, of spiritual movies. When this movie first came out, I was in my not wanting to go to any movie if it was considered to be like a blockbuster. I just thought, that's not for me. And it looked like this kind of goofy action movie. And once I saw it and kind of understood the deeper messages that were embedded within it, again, opening that doorway, I thought, oh my God, this is incredible. It's a goofy action movie. It's masquerading as a goofy action movie that's really like a spiritual instruction manual. And I'm not saying that I have all the keys to the kingdom on being able to decipher and understand this movie, but I've watched it quite a few times, and I'd like to just share what I see in that film, what I understand in that film, and how it applies spiritually to us. It's super cool, and I think it's going to be one of these timeless films that people are still watching decades, if not more, from now. All right, let's see what else we have here. Here is Heather Marney. Hello, Heather. My brother, sister, and I were raised without TV for years. I only was around cable when I was a young adult, and it was very overwhelming. But just being said visually and verbally. Yeah, I mean, my mother did the same thing. And I remember resenting her for it at the time, feeling like, why have you taken the television away? This is so weird. All my friends have TV. And there was a television in the house, but it was this little black and white, and it was put away in a closet. And if I wanted to watch it, I had to ask permission, take it out of the closet and plug it in and put up the aerials and watch my one program. And then when that was over, I put the TV away. And what I realized looking back on that later as an adult was that it if for nothing else, it caused me to become a more voracious reader. And I had an opportunity to look through old report cards that were being thrown away of my performance when I was like in 4th or 5th grade. And the one thing they kept saying about me that was sort of on the positive side would be athletics and reading. Everywhere else I was a little rocky, but I think the reason I was such a good reader is because I didn't have television. And I think kids are curious and they want to entertain themselves and they want to learn. And so I would just read. And I don't think I would have done that if I had had kind of unlimited access to television. So that, along with my wife's influence, really informed our decision when we were raising our children. And now they're adults. And I think they're in the same place that I was when I went from being a kid to being an adult, feeling so grateful that they spent more of their time outside, more of their time reading, more of their time creating, playing, and so forth, and not being in front of a television. I'm grateful to my mother, and I'm grateful to my wife, and now grateful that my kids, are happy with it too. So cool. Good for you, Heather. Good for your parents. Here is Amy McFarland saying hello to everyone. Hello, Amy. Just scrolling down here, folks. There's one of my kids now, Henry McLaughlin. Greyhound was such a good movie. Good to see you, Pops. Good to see you too, Henry. Wonderful that you're here. And by the way, I just watched it recently. So I watched it again for the second time and I liked it. It was really good even the second time. So I'd recommend you check it out a second time too. I know we share that one. And I love you. Here's Carmen Fringer saying, Matrix, I will be looking forward to that. Awesome. And here's Simone saying that my son Henry McLaughlin sent you here, you poor thing, Simone. Welcome. I've heard your name, and I understand, I believe your family's from South Africa originally. So it's nice to sort of meet you. Maybe I will meet you in person someday. See here. Okay, so here's some testimony. So my son is saying, absolutely, no television was the best idea. So that's a pretty good endorsement, I would have to say, coming right from the horse's mouth, as it were. Here's Novella. Novella West says, when we recognize deceptive subliminal practices happening to us, especially in person, what do you recommend we do to protect ourselves? Okay, so I talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but I did say I was going to come back to it again at the end. And I think awareness, I think you would find most experts would agree that awareness basically defangs the subliminal attack, if you will. So if you understand what's happening, it's like you can back away from it. That doorway between the conscious and the subconscious will close when you go into the intellectual, rational part of your mind. I think this is why people have often said, don't let yourself get pressured into a sale. If a used car salesman is like, aren't you the decision maker? How come you have to go talk to your wife? What's the matter with you? This car won't be here. Someone else is going to buy it. You won't get the same deal. I'm giving you a great deal. You really need to buy it now. That putting that pressure on you is not allowing you the space to sort of step out of your emotions and come back into your logical, conscious, rational mind and start asking yourself if this really is a good idea. So time is a way of protecting yourself. Anyone who wants you to act and act immediately, you have to do it now, is hoping that you won't kind of recover, emerge from the hypnotic trance that you've come into through fear or through greed or through repetition or through authority or through emotion or the effects of your peer group or all of these other techniques that are being employed. And I think I know they inherently understand in those cases where they know they're doing something nefarious, that they got to get you to do it fast. If you walk away, your chances are you're not going to come back and do it. And so many offers are limited time offers because it's playing in on the scarcity principle. This is another hardwired aspect of us. If we think there's not going to be another loaf of bread at the store, we're going to run in and fight with somebody else over the last loaf of bread. So back to protecting yourself, I think creating for yourself time and space with which to make the decision is of critical importance. Time is you as the buyer is your friend. It's the enemy of the person who's trying to persuade you. And that's why their techniques are often using time to get you to make a decision. Now, some of that is totally legitimate. For example, there's so much information coming at us. There's so many different offers coming at us that a marketer knows that if they can't get you to pull the trigger right away, you're going to have a million other offers coming at you. That's a legitimate concern for compressing the time. But in general, if somebody's trying to pressure you with time to make a decision, that's a warning flag. And they should be fine if you say, you know what, I need more time to make this decision. I'm feeling kind of pressured into things, and I'm going to need a little bit more time before I tell you yes or I tell you no. So that's a really good mechanism for protecting yourself. You said, what do we do if we're aware of what's happening? That in and of itself is going to give you a certain amount of protection. You could also say, I'm disengaging from you right now. Either to never engage with you again, or I'm disengaging from you now and I'm going to come back later and talk to you later. Because in a way, what you're basically doing is sort of breaking the spell. You're interrupting a pattern. You're interrupting a flow of taking you from point A to point F. You might call that a sales process. And there are people and companies that teach this sort of thing of taking people through these different steps from being introduced to an idea to pulling the trigger on the idea. And if you move yourself out at some point in that process, you've kind of disrupted the process and you've given yourself more time to reflect upon it. And how many times has this happened to all of us, where you really thought when you first looked at an item, oh, I really think I like that. Excuse me, I really think I want to buy that. And then you thought, well, no, let me think about this. I'm going to go home and think about this. And by the next morning, it's like, nah, I don't really need that. I don't really need it. So I hope that all makes sense. The things I said earlier were qui bono, which is who benefits. If somebody wants you to do something or believe something, ask yourself the question, who benefits by you taking on this belief or this idea or buying this belief, idea, product, or service? Who benefits from that? And are they the ones who are trying to get me to do this thing? And are there other people I could talk to about the same thing and get their impression? So, the reviews on Amazon, I think, is a wonderful way to get a different perspective on the same product or service. It's always better if you actually know the person and talk to them. Hey, what was your experience dealing with Joe over at the paving company? What was your experience when you bought this Honda Pilot? Those things are really powerful as well. So hopefully some of that helped, but definitely awareness of what's happening, creating space, who benefits, all of these are excellent ways of protecting yourself. Yeah, so Francesca is saying, yes, FOMO, fear of missing out and scarcity. Scarcity is definitely a psychological principle that is often employed to cause people to want to buy something. If somebody thinks that it's in scarce supply, they have that fear of missing out, and then they have the effect of the peer group. It must be because there's so few of these left. It must be because they're so good, because my peer group is consuming them. They're buying them, and if they're buying them, it must mean I should buy it too. So that's a really powerful principle. The other principle I wanted to mention too is that goes along with fear of missing out and scarcity is something called the foot in the door technique. And this is a psychological principle whereby if you can get someone to say yes to something small, you later can get them to say yes to something really, really big. And the scientific study that I read was they had, like college students, psychology students, volunteers, whatever, going around to people's homes and asking them if they would put a sign in their yard. And the sign was about this big. It was like 3 by 5 inches. And because it was so small, they had a pretty high level of people saying, sure, you can put that sign in my yard. But the real test was going back to the same homes a week later and having this absolutely colossal, like ridiculously, cartoonishly large sign, and going back to the people and asking them if they would put that sign in their yard. And the level of uptake, in other words, the number of people that would say yes to that was much, much higher than the control group, where they went to other people's houses and for the first time said, well, can we put this huge sign in your yard? So it's almost like escalation. The what are they called? The pickup artists will talk about escalation. The pickup artists are actually psychological savants. Like, they invest so much of their time in understanding psychology so that they can be better at picking up women, that they've developed kind of interesting insights. Whatever you think of them, I don't think much of them, but the techniques are fascinating, just about how the human mind works. And they talk about escalation. That a small yes leads to a larger yes. This is what people are taught in sales and sales training. A small yes leads to a larger yes. There's even something called a yes set. Yes, 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 yes. And then you ask the really big question and you're more likely to get a yes than if you didn't sort of prime the pump. And these are other techniques that are out there and that are used by people that want to sell you products, services, policies, programs, and ideas. All right, let's see if there's any more here before we say goodbye for the weekend. Let's see. So Gigi Carlson is saying, is there any programming going on in the push for these vaccines? This is such a radioactive topic that I'm going to make sure that I steer clear of it. But the only thing I would say is to take you back to anything that is being promulgated, anything that's being put forward, a product, a service, a policy, an idea, anything, because sales is involved in everything. That where one person wants to get another person to do something, there's a sales process involved. And I am not at all anti-sales. In fact, I used to be in sales for a long time, and I even wrote a book that's now out of print. I'm going to get it back in print, called Becoming the Customer. And it's the combination of sort of body language and how the mind works with being an ethical and moral salesperson. Because for some people, sales has a horrible connotation because they've had horrible experiences. But for other people, sales has a really good connotation because a really good person helps the prospect, the client and the customer, realize whatever their goals are, solve whatever their problems are. So I can say for sure, and again, I don't have a negative view on sales per se. I have a negative view on negative sales practices. I have a positive view on positive sales practices. So long way of saying, anytime somebody wants to get you to do something, they're engaged in a sales practice. Even dating, applying for and interviewing for a job, you're involved in a sales practice. We've all, regardless of our job title, we've all been in the salesperson's role. And we've all, for sure, been in the purchaser or buyer's role. And anytime one person wants to get another person to do something, they are going to present the world in a certain way, right? And how far they take that. Do they use some of these techniques? Absolutely. These techniques would potentially be on the table. So you know, make your own inferences there. But yeah, a product, a service, a policy, an idea. Hey, even when this country decides it's going to go to war, there's a sales process that goes on, convincing the American people that this is a good idea. You know, any large policy generally has some kind of sales element that is attached to it. And this is where I think we all can take a step back, ask to slow things down, get information from a variety of different sources, you know, try to take out the bells and whistles, in other words, the moving images and the sounds, and just read about it. And read what organizations and individuals have to say about it from a walk of different perspectives before we come to our conclusion. And try as much as we can not to be in a heightened emotional state, because when we're in a heightened emotional state, that thinking goes from the prefrontal cortex back to the lizard part of the brain, and it becomes harder for us to make a rational decision. Remember, time, when you're the purchaser, time is on your side. It shouldn't hurt anything to wait a day before you make a decision, or to wait a week before you make a decision, or to talk to your husband or talk to your wife or talk to your kids before you make a decision, talk to your neighbor before you make a decision, do a little bit of research. Like, that shouldn't hurt anything to slow things down. And to ask yourself, who benefits? And is the person who is benefiting from this one of the people or the organizations that is trying to get me to do something? So hopefully that makes sense. All right. I'm going to take one more here. You're welcome, Gigi. Absolutely. And thank you for being here. Here is Carmen Fringer saying, dating equals sale. Oh boy, did I fall for an excellent used car salesman. That is awesome. That is the funniest comment of the day, for sure. And yes, and think about it. Nobody thinks that taking a shower before you go on a date is deceptive, or, you know, combing your hair, or making sure you wear nice clothes, or you go to a nice place. I mean, everyone's trying to put their best foot forward. And I don't see anything wrong with that at all. It's when somebody is trying to get inside of someone else's mind and harness something they already believe and play on fear, for example, or play on greed. That's where things start to go south. Because you can use a lot of these techniques that I was talking about today that are just tools, like the shovel. You can kill somebody with a shovel. You can help, you know, dig a well with a shovel. The tool is agnostic. It's how it's used. But is someone trying to manipulate you for their own gain? Or are they trying to help you move in a direction you want to move in for your highest and greatest good? You know, like these are things that we have to be discerning with and understand that everything I'm talking about today largely are just tools. It's how they're employed. And you just want to make sure you're not being taken advantage of by slick operators using these tools. All right. Here is Jill Turner, and Jill says, it's incredibly disconcerting when you think back over your life, especially when young, how easily you have been coerced into decisions you didn't really want to make, but felt guilty saying no. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And guilt, let's face it, I mean, guilt is a very powerful social tool that is used for persuasion. It is used sometimes by family, sometimes by friends, sometimes by lovers, sometimes by teachers and coaches, sometimes by politicians, sometimes by other public figures, sometimes by religious figures. And I think it's that guilt in particular is an especially damaging weapon to deploy, and that anytime somebody deploys that as a weapon, we should be on our guard and really investigate that carefully, because it's a pretty nasty, in my opinion, a pretty nasty weapon, and it hits right at that part of us that wants that wants to be seen as good, wants to be seen as moral, wants to be seen as doing the right thing, wants to be able to fit in with the herd, doesn't want to be felt like we're being shunted off onto this island by ourselves. You know, that's another thing that, and I guess I would close with that, which is, and I was talking about this with a client today, the worst kinds of atrocities occur when one person or a group of people, based upon some kind of superficial characteristic, is separated, divided, or isolated from the rest of the group. And the message is basically, they're not like us. They're dangerous. That's where atrocities happen. And I think by employing guilt, it's one of the ways of separating somebody from the perception of separating them from the vast majority of people. A good person wouldn't do that, right? A blank person wouldn't do that. The only people that do that sort of thing are these kinds of people. So I think we have to be very, very, very careful about allowing ourselves to be segmented and divided from each other into subgroups, because I think history teaches us that is one of the ways where, as I said, whereby even atrocities can be committed and allowed to unfold. You know, when we see other individuals as different from us, as somehow separate or less than us. So anyway, I love this conversation today. I hope you guys get something out of it. I really appreciate your participating in this. I'm sorry that for whatever reason, it took me a while to figure out how to get the comments section back to where I could see it. So one of these days, maybe if this live ever gets big enough, I can afford to have like an intern here that can help me with some of the technical stuff so I can just focus on you guys. I would love to do that. It's kind of in the back of my mind. I hope you will consider showing up next Friday live at 5 for the spiritual film analysis of the movie The Matrix, where we're going to go through all of the spiritual aspects of it. And that should be a lot of fun. So hope you guys have a really, really good weekend, and look forward to seeing you here next Friday, live at 5 Eastern US. Have a wonderful weekend, and talk to you next week. Bye.